some people had come out to take some pictures of my bar for a book. And all of a sudden it turned into a conversation about, well, we should have a talk about the history of tiki, even though most of these guys have lived through the whole original round of it.
Right.
And but they became very interested and wanted me to give a talk. And then they said, well, let's mix up some drinks that night, special drinks, and then let's just turn it into a party and invite some people.
Now it's one of our pretty big parties.
And so, yeah, it turned into quite the party.
Yeah.
And we've just finished our 3rd annual one this year, and very successful. And thank you all who came out to that, and hope you come again next year.
Yeah. But, aside from tiki, you're a pretty big adventurer in your own right. So you grew up in California, right?
Yes. California native.
From what I understand, you did like the entirety of the Boy Scout experience.
Yeah,
right?
I pretty much never did sports, partly because I couldn't. But my interests early on were in camping, fishing, exploring ghost towns. Did that with my family a lot during the summers, and it made for great summers. And then we started in Indian guides and all the way through all levels of Boy Scouts. And so I did a lot.
You did Eagle Scout. You got your Eagle.
And then,
what age did you get your Eagle at?
I think I was 13.
Oh my God.
Or 14, somewhere in there.
I got mine 18 on the dot. on the dot.
Yeah, I was kind of an overachiever, I guess.
There you go.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I love the outdoors. So it's always been a place where I like to go and get away from it all and just kind of be at peace and away from the madness for a while.
So in addition to that, you got an EMT certification at some point? Is that right?
At the end of high school, I ended up getting an EMT certification because I had this idea that I wanted to go into medicine. And so I spent about 1.5 years volunteering in the emergency room at Torrance Memorial, back when you could do such things.
Right.
And at the end of that, I decided maybe that wasn't what I wanted to do. But it was fascinating, and I've continued to take courses in various things.
But you kind of kept up your skills at the same time, right? You've done some wilderness stuff, right?
Yeah, and just last year did a combat medic sort of course for.
Yeah.
You see things going on like mass shootings and whatnot, and you think, well, who's going to help me or someone I know if that happens? So
I think if you're a traveler or adventurer or whatever, no matter what you're doing, having those skills is pretty important, and definitely gives you the confidence, and I'd say kind of ups your level of risk analysis, so you're more comfortable wherever you are.
I've had enough guns around me at various places that the odds are higher when you travel sometimes.
Right. So tonight we're talking about your trip to the Himalayas, and basically your tour around all the ancient kingdoms. I say it's surrounding Everest, right?
Yeah, all in the general area.
All in the general area of Mount Everest, which normally we hear a talk here about
people climbing it,
climbing Everest, or going to the base camp or something like that. But you basically took a trip all around it.
Yes, we saw it many times. We flew over it, or slightly around it, and then we saw it from many mountaintops in places we were, off in the distance. And interestingly, it was, you'd look out and you go, where's Everest? And they'd point it out, and you go, well, that's very small. And then they'd say, well, that's 200 miles away. And then you'd realize, okay.
Okay.
Yes, that's Everest.
So yeah, that's interesting, because I think a lot of adventurers going out there, they bypass all that culture, and there's a ton of culture, and I'm glad we're here tonight exploring that.
Yeah.
Because most of the time it's like, hey, I hate to say, who's going to help get me to the top, right? Yeah. But I mean, that whole area, and at the between India and China, there's a ton of culture there.
Yes. And in the old days, there were several kingdoms. There was the kingdom of Gorkha, where Gurkha is derived from, and is currently in Nepal. There was Tibet. Darjeeling was a territory that kind of went back and forth between the kingdom of Sikkim, which was another place we went, and back to the kingdom of Gorkha. So that was in contention a lot. There was a lot of warfare going on between all of these kingdoms at various times.
So let's start where where'd you fly into? So you fly in from somewhere.
We flew in. I don't even remember where we left from, but we flew into Nepal, into Kathmandu.
Okay.
And great, amazing city. We started off on our arrival by someone having zipped open our zippers on our bags, and some people had some things stolen. We didn't, fortunately, but welcome to Nepal.
Yeah, everything's been searched, right?
Yes.
Do we have that picture of you guys coming into Nepal on the plane, I think? So there's Everest.
Yeah, this was in one of the transits. So that's Everest in the background. And so you come into Nepal and...
That's what you see before you land.
Yeah. And you get to Nepal and it's just an ancient city. Very few vehicles at the time we were there anyway. And so motor scooters, a few cars, but if you took those out of the picture, it's like stepping back 800 years probably. You know, there's still a lot of use of animals for burden, and you don't see a ton of Western wear necessarily. So you get a feel that if you go to Europe, you say, oh, this is old, you know. But you go to a place like Nepal, you go, wow, no, this is old.
Right.
It's been around a long time.
Huh.
So I'm fascinated by things like that. The culture and the places that we go, I typically don't go for a sport or an achievement thing. I tend to go to experience the culture in the place that I'm going, and to try to capture some of that sometimes and bring it back.
So you did bring some stuff back here.
Yes. And
the whiskey's not a part of it.
So in Nepal.
So we have set that down.
In Nepal, monkeys are revered. Monkeys are all over the place in the Himalayas, and they are treated variously well or not so well, but they're pretty much tolerated everywhere. They're in abundance everywhere. This is the only trip I've ever had to take where I had to get a rabies shot before I went. And so one of the main things there is a large monkey temple that's up on a pretty steep hilltop, and there are prayer flags running from adjacent mountains over to that hilltop, and it's a spectacular looking place, but everywhere you go is monkeys.
Right.
And you have to be careful where you step because they leave droppings everywhere. They'll steal stuff. Don't even think about pulling food out around any of them because
they're a menace.
They're a menace.
But people just kind of let them be, right? There's no, because they are revered in a certain.
Yeah, I mean you won't see someone kick a monkey or anything, but
right. But they'll shoo it away.
Yeah. So they're tolerated. They're respected, and they're kind of.
And this is some sort of.
So this is actually
monkey statue, or
this is a statue from another temple that's in Kathmandu, in the city proper, and outside the opening gate, there's a little bit larger version of this, about this tall.
And what's he holding? I
believe it's a jackfruit, and it's sort of a fertility thing. So between the monkeys that are revered and then the jackfruit as a fertility symbol, this is a very common thing.
Can you hold that up so we can see a close shot of it? A little bit higher. A little bit higher. There
sorry.
it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a reproduction. This is a
reproduction, and this was funny because we were negotiating the price, as everything is negotiated in those areas, and
the real one standing behind you.
So the guy knows he's got you because the temple's right there, and he's the only guy who's got one of these. But I was talking to my wife about it. Do we want to spend that much? Where are we going to put it? And so the guy made a comment to me. He goes, "Oh, so I see she's in charge." And I said, "Oh, you just made a big mistake." Because you know what? Yes, now she is in charge.
Yeah, you negotiated with her. Have fun.
He regretted it. He ended up dropping his price quite a bit just to get us out of the store. So we brought that back. And then we also had a lot of time around the hotel because of some insurrection going on with the Marxists. And so we had time to do some shopping.
So tell me about that. Wait. So shopping's fine, sure. Right? But there was a Marxist insurrection while you were there.
Yes.
To a certain extent. I mean, it wasn't like a cultural revolution type thing, but.
No, but what had been going on for some time was there was a very strong Marxist base amongst the workers in Nepal. And so they'd put a lot of pressure on the monarchy, and this was a monarchy when we were there. It was the monarchy of Nepal, and or Kingdom of Nepal. And they had made some gains the prior year before we were there in getting a rudimentary parliament set up, and so they had some representation with the monarchy. And apparently that wasn't enough for them. And so while we were there, they decided to get particularly active, and so all of a sudden there were demonstrations in the streets, and the military rolled out, and so they had armed military lining streets, and they had armored vehicles out, and all of a sudden we weren't going as many places as we were planning on. So we were taking back streets and sometimes just not even going out because it was a little hazardous and they didn't want us in the middle.
Now, as they were demonstrating and stuff, what was their reaction to, I guess, Westerners hanging out in the middle of their I wouldn't say it's a revolution, right? But what did it result in?
Yeah, I don't think they really cared about us, honestly. This was all about them and the government, the monarchy. And, you know, I don't think we'd have been at risk from them particularly. But I think they just didn't want us getting caught up if some shooting started between
right,
the government and the demonstrators.
So your movements became kind of...
So they were like, you know, you're not going into that part of town today.
It's a bummer.
Yeah. So we missed some things, but we had an experience we might not otherwise have had.
Yeah. What did that feel like? Like what was the climate like in terms of what did the city feel like?
It was a little weird. There was a little bit of a pall over it. I mean, it was tangible, and one of the shopkeepers, where I got this knife actually, said, you know, it's not like this all the time. People are afraid to come here. Please tell your friends it's safe, and we want them to come. And you could tell that this was really hurting the economy there. You know, people who depend on tourism. It was really kind of becoming a threat that people were afraid to go, and so they were seeing a decline in their economy.
So this is the shopkeeper. So this knife you got in Kathmandu.
Yes.
And what type of knife is this?
So this is what's called a kukri knife, and comes with a scabbard. And a lot of people see these. You'll see them on the walls around the club. Actually, other people have collected some. This is a...
What's in the scabbard here? Is this some sort of like sharpening?
There are actually some smaller knives.
Mini knives.
For skinning and fingernail cleaning.
Is that magnetic?
Else you might want. I don't think so, but... So this is a very weight-forward, heavy-bladed, very sharp knife, basically made for hacking people.
Okay.
And this was a warrior's knife carried by the Gorkhas, or Gurkha, and the Gurkha soldiers, very famous, working with the British military. They were very feared soldiers, and they basically said, well, you know, a lot of people ended up being decapitated in their trenches by people who snuck up on them with one of these and took them out in one swipe.
So you might know that as a Gurkha knife, but that's not.
Yeah, it could be either way. So the Gurkha or Gorkha is the actual tribe, and that'll figure into a story later in.
So this is a real deal. This isn't like a tourist knife.
No, that's
I can feel that this is like
that's a real deal. That was. We talked to the guy. They're made in a particular village where they're specialists in doing these.
And it's sharp too.
Yes.
Wish we had something.
They're basically up in here. Today they're actually made largely from old truck leaf springs.
Really?
Because the spring steel makes for a great blade. It holds an edge. It's tough.
And do you know what this little thing's for?
I do not. I've tried to research that, and I've seen different theories about it. Basically, it's decorative mostly.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Right.
Thank you. Yes.
What is that in Boy Scouts? Yes. What are you supposed to do?
You have to say thank you before you release the blade.
So that's cool. So while you were in Nepal, you were kind of limited. You did some shopping. You saw the temples. The monkeys were a nuisance.
Yes.
But it's a thing. I remember I went to Gibraltar. Oh, those monkeys are a nuisance.
Yes. They are.
But people kind of tolerate them, right? It's like a thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple more stories about monkeys later on too. So.
Okay.
So anyway, we had this kind of uprising while we were there. It kind of limited our travel. We ended up going on to our next destination, but 6 months later, they managed to dissolve the monarchy, and they became
Wow.
the People's Republic or whatever.
So when you were there, it was a monarchy. There was a king.
Yes.
And there was an uprising and protest in the streets. And 6 months later, after that,
The monarchy's gone.
gone completely. Not like a parliamentary monarchy,
No,
like
dissolved.
whoa,
Not even figurehead.
not even wow.
So, yeah, there'd been
And
a lot
did
of
that guy get
animosity over time.
decapitated? With a
Not that I
jerk
know of.
knife?
I'm
No,
pretty sure he loaded up $1 billion into a plane and flew somewhere. But
I give it to him, right?
Yeah.
So where'd you go after Kathmandu?
so we went from Kathmandu to Tibet, and
Okay.
we flew into Lhasa. Went through all the Chinese check through, and we spent time in Lhasa. We toured the Patala Palace and the
I think we have a
Jokang
picture of the
Temple.
Patala Palace
Yeah.
up there, right?
Okay, that's Nepal. Click forward one more. Okay, that's back up one. Yeah, well, let's start with that one. So this is, we got there early in the morning, and we kind of parked on an off street, and as you walk around into the main plaza here, the sun's very low, and there's just all of this sage being burnt.
So all those clouds, go back to that real quick. All those clouds,
That's all smoke.
that's smoke from sage.
Well, I mean, there are clouds up above,
Well,
but,
yeah.
but
But
the
all the-
low-lying stuff is all smoke coming from the temple. So you're walking towards the temple right now. And it just, it's hard to describe to people who haven't experienced it, but sometimes when you end up in a place and there's a certain wood smoke and a certain feel in the air, you just know you're in a completely different place. And so those kinds of memories that have those sensory stimulus really stick with you sometimes.
Yeah. Well, they say like sense is like or smell is the strongest scent, strongest sense linked to memory.
Yes.
Right. So I can imagine if you go into a place like that and you've never smelled any of that before.
Yeah.
Your brain would be like, well, this is different.
Yeah,
Because
it's
I
an
think
overload,
no matter
man.
where you go, your brain, you something and you're like, I know what this is.
Yeah.
I know this.
Yeah.
But so what
and
you're
you get
saying is
you get flashbacks too.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll smell that smell somewhere just by chance, and then all of a sudden
it'll take you back to.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
So there's another picture after that, and let's just stay on this for a couple photos.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So this is on top of the Jokang Palace, or temple rather, on the roof, and you're looking out across the valley to the Patala Palace in the background.
So that tower looks like a giant bell, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
got bells around it, right?
It's not, but yeah, they have a lot of strange-looking towers and things that hard to explain. I've seen things wrapped in like poles wrapped in like buffalo hide or something, yak hides and things. Just strange. But it's a different country. But they do a thing going into the temple, the next photo, called prostration. And so this person, wherever he's coming from, is coming up close to the temple, and he's laying on the ground, and he'll touch his forehead to the ground, and then he'll stand up and he'll walk to where his head was, and then he'll lay down or prostrate himself again, and he will do that for the entire journey from wherever he's coming from until he gets into the temple.
That could be a long.
It can be long.
By your estimate, what do you think the longest distance someone did that for? Like, were you ever aware of a situation and like, okay, so there's the temple and there's the guy on his journey of prostration.
Yeah. So yes, I'm pretty sure this probably isn't the longest one, but just to give a sense of dedication and we were driving on a highway from Lhasa to Shigazi, which is another major spiritual center. And by car, it's about a 6-hour drive. About 2 hours into the drive, we saw one of these guys prostrating himself along the side of the road.
So that's like 120 miles, we'll say.
Well, 6 hours at figures 60 miles an hour.
Just more? Oh, I thought you were 2 hours in.
Well,
so he wasn't going to like an intermediate temple
but he
or
had
something
probably
like
come
that?
from Lhasa.
Jeez.
I don't know. But he had at least 4 hours drive to go, and he's doing the whole trip one body length at a time. Stand up, lay down, stand up, lay down. I mean, the spiritual strength, the dedication, the will to do that is just incredible to me.
It's going to be the next
I wouldn't be
CrossFit
doing it.
workout
Yeah.
right there.
Yes, probably so.
don't run. You don't have to run around the block. You have to prostrate yourself in front of the temple of CrossFit.
Yes.
So this guy was just on the side of the road, and you're pretty sure that there wasn't some sort of temple anywhere near. So.
Well, there are temples everywhere, but yeah, apparently it's fairly common to make that journey because Lhasa and Shigazi, and there are some other cities as well that have very famous, well-known temples, and it's a sacred trip for people. It's kind of like doing the Hajj. Right? I'm going to get there, and I'm going to do it this way, and whatever it takes me, and I'll have done it right, and I guess you get bonus points for that.
There's a movie called Paths of the Soul. It's a documentary called Paths of the Soul about a family of Tibetans who prostrates themselves, does this 10,000 kilometers from their village to Lhasa, and then they go back.
Wow. Yeah, that's
insane.
That's some dedication.
I'd say.
Yeah.
So you saw these guys on your drive from Lhasa to where?
To Shigazi.
Okay.
And along the way, we saw a lot of interesting things. We stopped at a few other temples. We went over a pass that was wasn't the tallest pass, but it was about 15,000 feet. Pretty.
That's big.
Pretty up there.
Normally you have to climb. You know, we had Brian Creasy here last week talking about the peaks that he's climbed, right?
Yeah.
And he wasn't climbing 15,000 foot peaks, and you're just driving over this pass, right?
Yeah.
So this really is like I mean, you know, it's Everest, right? The Himalayas.
Yeah.
So there's a pass that you're driving.
You can actually bypass it, but you know, it's also a sacred spot. There's a lake up there. It's this turquoise blue lake.
So how'd you do? How'd you do at 15,000 feet?
We did well. I mean, I'm not the most physically fit person at the best of times, but with the Diamox, you know, that helped the altitude sickness.
What's Diamox?
Oh, it's a heart med. It was recommended to us by our travel medicine group because you always want to go in and see what shots you need and what emergency medicines you might need and various.
So yeah, what shots did you need to go here?
We actually had to get rabies shots because of all the monkeys and
this guy right here.
Yeah, and because of the propensity of dogs in India. There are dogs everywhere. I mean, and monkeys. So the odds of encountering rabies.
So you get rabies for dogs and monkeys.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Diamox was the only other major thing that we got, and it just helps with the altitude sickness. My wife was in Tibet, probably in the 80s, I think. And she said the group they were with, they had like in their room, they had oxygen bags that were made out of goat skins, right? So they would just fill up this goat skin with oxygen. Some other people had tanks, but they didn't have them. And they would actually breathe the oxygen if they didn't feel that well. And one guy at dinner.
So they just had the tank and they'd fill up a little bag and then.
Yeah. And at dinner one night, one of the guys that she was traveling with just passed out and just face planted in his soup at dinner. So it can be serious. And I've had altitude sickness elsewhere hiking, much lesser altitudes than that. And So it really helped a lot. You get some tingly fingers, weird feelings.
Why is that?
I don't know why that is. It's you mentioned baby vasoconstrictor. It's
I mean,
just
that
a
would make
known side
sense.
effect
I don't know
of
what Diamox does, but
all I can say is it worked. So that was good. We had another party with us who didn't fare so well. He was on other medications. I don't know what they were, but they were like, I don't know if they were blood pressure or other things. He had a whole bag full of meds, and the altitude started interacting badly with him. And
where was this? This was going over that pass?
In Tibet,
okay.
as I recall, and he just seemed kind of off for a little bit, and then one morning he came out of the hotel. We were getting ready to leave, and he got in the wrong vehicle, carrying his breakfast on a plate.
Like he had the fork and
fork like he had just dished up his buffet breakfast and gotten in the wrong one. So they steered him over to us, and we were like, okay, well, you can't really take their plates and stuff, but he was adamant, and it became clear during the rest of the trip he was just completely out of it. And so at the next town, we had to arrange for him to fly out and go home.
Huh.
Sad, because it was a lot of the great part of the journey was ahead of us at that point. And so yeah, altitude does weird things.
Yeah, I'd say. That's funny.
And so along the way here, we also had some. I don't know if there's a picture of, if you skip back to forward. One more.
Was that, go back to that one. I want to see that one of the, go
back
one more.
Okay, so this was the guy on the road to Shigazi.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
you
don't know
can see
how
there's,
far he's going.
I mean, there's nothing there for as far as the eye can see, as far as housings or anything else. So yeah, he was in the middle of nowhere. So how far do you think
that guy would, I keep going back to this, how far do you think he would go a day doing burpees?
Man, I can't even imagine. I used to get
like 10 miles?
Trying to do 20 miles walking in a day. I can't imagine
how if you're walking, if you're doing 20 to 30 miles a day, you got a good pace going on.
Let's just say he had a lot of spare time on his hands and no job to go to, because
in shape.
Most people in Tibet are. There aren't a lot of fat people in Tibet.
Is it because of good diet, or is it because of this?
I think it's a combination of diet and a lot of exercise, a lot of hard work. It's especially out in these regions in the farm areas. I think the next photo has no, that's a monk carrying Budweiser.
That's a lock.
This group here was just some gals in a field. They were gathering from the field, and we're sitting there taking a little break, and so I walked by and asked them if I could take a photo, and they're Tibetans are, please. Mm-hmm. Tibetans are amazing people. They have a great attitude about things. It's very sad. Our tour guide, when they're out in public, they're always under the gun. In China, they don't want Tibet to exist other than as a tourist destination. They took it over. They don't want them to have their own identity. They want to dilute that and fold them in more. And so, on the formal tour, you get, oh yes, look at the beautiful this and that. And, China's been good for us because we have a road or a railroad now. But on the last night, we were in a private restaurant that was owned by friends of the guide, and he said, it's not that way. You don't progress in Chinese society, in Tibetan society now, unless you marry a Chinese. They're literally trying to breed Tibetans out of.
So how do they do that? Because they value it as like a tourist destination, and obviously that tourist destination is because they have an independent identity.
Sure.
And a strong cultural heritage, but at the same time, they're trying to.
But they want control too. They want the tourist aspect of it, but they don't want the independence of it. They want them.
But it seems like you can't have one without the other.
So it's a balance. It's a balance.
And do you think the Chinese government is riding that balance, or do you think that they're just, I guess, using Tibet as a means to have tourists there until they can erase it?
I mean, they built a train just to bring tourists from China into the area. So it's a big tourist destination, and I'm not really sure what they get out of it. I'm sure there's some natural resources there somewhere that are worth having, but you wouldn't know it just to look at it.
Right.
So.
There's nothing that you didn't see any major
No, I didn't see any mining
anything.
or industry of any kind. I mean, it's bleak farmland and pastures and a lot of yaks, and most of the people are living in this village here. They're living in mud brick homes. They use cow dung dried cow dung for cooking fuel in their stove. Animals live under the house. On the first level, they live on the second story. It's not an easy life.
And it's interesting because when you hear about these guys that do these Everest treks and everything, that there's permits from the Tibet side, and you hear about how they value that revenue. Why would they care?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the U.S. government caring about the revenue that you get out of Mount Whitney permits, even if or Grand Canyon permits to hike or something? Like it'd be a drop in the bucket, but
yeah. No, it's amazing. It's very sad to me because you see everything there in all these areas is so ancient. I had that picture of the lock up there. I mean, that lock was hand forged probably
do we have that
300
lock?
years ago
And that
or
lock,
something. I think it's probably one or two, that one.
That lock was still in service.
That was still in service in one of the temples. It was a storeroom door. And it's got ornate scribed detail on the hasp. And someone in one of these red robes is walking around with that key in their pocket, to open it. But it's been in use. It's clearly been there since the beginning of time. But they still use everything. I mean, they don't really have a lot of modern stuff, and the modern stuff that China has put in just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's such an ugly contrast to it. It's very strange.
And is it being used? Like, do they appreciate it? Like, what does China put in there?
The new stuff?
Yeah, the new
stuff.
Well,
most of the stuff that was put in by China, I'm pretty sure was put in for the Chinese administration.
Like a train station or a building or something like that.
Office buildings and the like. But they put a big building across from the Potala Palace. It's like, so back when Gloria came in, when you came in from the airport, this valley opens up and there's the Potala Palace. And now we drove in and there's
some administration
something
building
behind this big glass building, right? It's kind of weird, but
yeah,
it's a domination thing. I think the Potala Palace was like the Dalai Lama's
right
center, so they set up station right across the street with Chinese flags in between the two.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. When Rob Quist was here a couple of weeks ago, he talked about what was it? In Budapest, that Christian church.
Yeah.
Now it's a Muslim, it's a mosque, right? Put the new flag on top, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Just build over the old one.
It's kind of the story of history, right? You come in, you take over a region, you got to put your mark on it somehow.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Yeah. But it sounds like at least that they're preserving some of that.
Fortunately, a lot of it's still largely unspoiled.
That's good.
One funny note on the highway in between is you're driving from Lhasa to Shagazi and back. Our driver would just speed along at like 80 miles an hour, right? And then he would just pull over and say, "We're going to sit here for a little bit." Going, why? And he goes, "Well, they have checkpoints." Well, and he goes, "Well, if I get there too early, they'll know I've been speeding. And so we have to sit here for half an hour so that they won't know that I was speeding." Like, you could have just driven the speed limit and we'd have been fine, right?
Right.
But It's just a game.
I've always wondered why we haven't done that in the U.S. You're like, well, like with toll roads, right?
Oh yeah, I think about that every time I drive up here.
Like
they're clocking you between the.
Yeah, not to give the government another way to screw us over, right? But like those toll roads are set up for it. They know exactly what you average between those 2 points.
I'm sure they have a ticket button to flip somewhere when they need some revenue.
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah, when they need revenue, they're going to be like, oh yeah, all these people sped, Yeah. Oof, I don't want to think about that. Yeah, if you're paying for the toll road, right? Yeah. You feel like you should be able to speed. Like, is that a sense of entitlement that you have?
Of course, they're getting their tax out of that.
Yeah, but when you hear the fast pass transponder beep, you feel like you just bought the right to speed, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Which really pisses me off when there aren't other people not speeding in there.
Right. Like, why do we pay to be on this highway?
Get off of here.
But so what you're saying in Tibet, they actually check.
They do. They just have physical checkpoints, but every time a car passes through, they call ahead and say, "Yeah, this one just came through," and so they start the clock.
Yeah, God bless the USA, right?
Yeah.
All right. So where do you go from there? So
after Tibet, we briefly flew back through Nepal to get to the airport there, and then we flew to Bhutan. And the main purpose of the trip then was to see the Thimphu Festival in Thimphu, Bhutan.
Okay.
Which is it's basically almost a countrywide gathering that ends up in this city. And
this is analogous to like the Sing Sing that would happen. Yeah. That level, that.
Yeah, everybody gathers, they wear their finest outfits, all the dance troupes come out and they have competitions and everyone demonstrates their dancing abilities. And so that was our impetus to do the trip. But we thought, well, all right, if we're going to go see that, let's cover the area. So we added on the other things. So we end up in Paro, and it's Paro is a big bowl with high mountains all around it, and so when the plane comes in, you're flying a pretty large plane, and it comes in and it does a really steep bank into that bowl, and then drops down, and everyone, especially the pilots, are like, "Oh wow, that's a little close for comfort," but they do it all the time, and they know what they're doing. So.
Right.
So Paro is a spectacular valley, green flowers. The architecture in Bhutan is gorgeous and really unlike quite anyone else's. And at least up at those levels, you're in kind of almost pine forest area. But Bhutan is very water rich. Bhutan is one long country with a giant river running in the middle of it.
So they don't have the problems that we have in California. Do we have some pictures of Bhutan?
Yeah. I think. Can we maybe back up from? Yeah. Let's.
There's Everest again.
Let's start with that one. Okay, so this is a bridge over the river, and
the major river that goes through Bhutan. What's that called?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. Andy will figure it out.
Yeah. So the architecture there is very unique. Lifestyle is very, across all of the country, is very monk-like. They really value their culture. The one thing I'll hand the government there is that they don't want their culture dissolved, especially by Western influence, or by China or India invading them, which we'll get to in a minute. But they really value their dress, their way of life, and so the government really encourages people to wear traditional clothing all the time, and most people do.
How do they encourage?
They just promote it. It's
just like advertisements on TV.
At the time we were there, it was a monarchy. So.
A little bit heavier-handed of an encouragement, possibly.
Well, I don't think they were really. I didn't get the feeling that they just had a pride in their culture. Really, I mean, it wasn't like they were forced. People openly wanted to display their culture and preserve it.
Even like the young kids, because I mean that's how it starts, right? The young kids all watch TV.
We really saw very little Western wear there during the whole trip. Not until we got down to the southernmost part, next to India. we started to see more there, but the rest of the country, really not so much. So let's see, I wanted to step through a couple pictures here.
Did we find out the name of that river, by the way? What was that? That's the river that goes through Bhutan?
You were in Paro, right, Ken?
Yes.
So the name of that river is the Paro Chu.
Ah, okay, makes sense. So maybe we can run through a couple photos here. Let's just start with this one. So this was inside one of the zhongs, and they were just doing dishes after a meal. Next photo. So these are some of the dancers at the Thimphu Festival. You can see these spectacular wild colors, the masks, and they'll dance in unison a lot. You'll get these leaping motions where they'll get the whole group trying to jump in the air all at once. Mm-hmm. And out of about 300 pictures I took, I got one where they were all off the ground at the same time. So, we had people come from all over and cram into these places. Can we throw up the next one? We'll just walk through pictures for a few minutes here. So these kids were up in a little spy place up in the building, looking out. It was kind of cute, but they're having a good time watching the show. Next. Okay, so this guy is a clown, and you can't really tell so much, but what he's holding in his hand right there is a penis. And so
Wait,
this
so,
guy,
okay, so a lot to unpack there. Let's okay, so first of all, he's a clown.
He's a clown.
In other words, when we in America see Bozo the clown with his red nose and white face,
yeah,
this guy, pop him up, pop.
is
That guy is the equivalent.
kind of the equivalent.
Bhutan.
Now these are all various folk characters, right?
But his job is to like entertain.
Is to
children
entertain.
and
It's to
be
run
like a
around
goof.
the event, and what he does is he'll take this big wooden penis and he'll sneak up behind someone and he'll touch their cheek with it, and then they'll freak out and they'll run away, and it's all a big game. It's all in great fun, but it's hysterical to watch them do this.
Yeah.
But apparently it's a big deal in their culture. Yeah, if we could pull up the next photo, and
So
we'll stay on this for a little bit.
Does he harass everybody equally? So it's not
Yeah.
just he's like walking up behind women and
No.
and
It's everybody. Everybody's fair
penis
game,
on the cheek.
and it could be a minister. It could be anybody.
Everybody
Everybody's
gets it.
fair game.
Everybody gets on the cheek.
There's a great deal of equality in that whole thing. But the phallus is a big deal in Bhutan. So here's one inside the doorway in a house.
I didn't even notice that there was a.
Yeah, how could you
Giant
miss
orange
it?
penis on
right
the-
away. Yeah.
I was
the
looking
next-
at the skull from the.
Yeah. So the next
buffalo or
picture is they would hang these from the rafters to blow in the wind. So this is double-ended with a
It's like a wind chime.
pointer or
penis.
something. Yeah.
Is that it?
So it would just blow around in the wind. And then the next one, they would paint them on the
on the
sides
wall.
of houses. I mean, you just drive by and see these giant things painted on the sides of the
I mean, I
houses.
feel like we do that here too, in the United States. I feel like kids across schools draw that on their papers
Yeah,
and other people's
yeah.
papers. But
it's
put that back up.
It's
That's a new level of artistry right there.
It's
Like
it's a big fertility symbol. Well, I don't know if you know this. We live next to a church.
But this isn't graffiti.
No. This is
they
not
kept that up.
graffiti. This is
Put that back up.
This is someone's house decoration. You see a lot of them.
Yeah, that's well done.
So
Anatomically correct.
yeah, even a little squiggle out the front. So yeah, a little strange.
So
And-
their fertility symbols are very because I remember you were talking about this guy. He's got a jackfruit, and there's a monkey here with a jackfruit, and that's a symbol of fertility. Bhutan, it seems like, is a little bit more on the nose.
Yeah, they're not subtle about it at all. Another thing you would see a lot of driving along was chilies. They use chilies in cooking, so they grow a lot of chilies. So you'd be driving along and you'll see someone's roof just covered in red. And they're just drying chilies up there. They've harvested and they dump it all up on the roof to dry. So we can do the next picture.
We don't have to put that.
Okay, so I can just talk about this.
Throw it up there so everybody can see.
So this is an archery range we went to. This I think was in Paro. So if you look at this picture, we're sitting right in the middle. So you're looking to the right, and you see just to the right of the center, you see a couple of guys squatting down next to a target. If you go to the next picture, which is looking left from where we were, you see an archer there. Now those guys don't move when he shoots. They're there to distract him and make him miss the target.
What if he misses to the right?
Bad news for the guy on the right.
Huh.
So, and they'll stand there and they're drinking too. You know, this is like the equivalent of bowling. Archery is their their national sport, and they actually have teams that do very well in the Olympics. So when they're done at the end of the day, they go to the archery club instead of the bowling alley, and they drink a lot.
Do they make YouTube videos for this?
Because
I feel like they're missing out.
Yeah, you would.
I guarantee you, I've seen a lot of YouTube videos of people drinking with crossbows or compound bows or whatever.
Never ends well.
Yeah. It ends in a YouTube video.
I can tell you that to sit there and watch it is very engaging.
But they're okay. So they're lined up, right? It's almost like a joust, right? Like we're gonna sit like the apple on a head, but they have the target to the side.
Yeah.
And they're just shooting arrows back and forth.
Yeah. So they're trying to hit the target, obviously.
Yeah.
But they're there, just as he's getting ready to shoot, they'll do this, in front of the target, just to mess with him.
Oh boy.
And it's kind of like watching a car chase. You watch it for the whole thing because something's going to go wrong eventually.
Now, did you ever see something? Did you ever see a guy like juke out of the way, like boop?
Yeah, they have enough time. It's a long enough thing, and they've been doing it long enough that if they see it's going a little off, they'll.
And this isn't
but
like
they're
one
pretty
of those,
good too.
those,
It's not
those
like,
like crazy arrows. It's meant for taking down hogs. This is just a target arrow.
And none of these guys is going to miss by 3 feet. I mean,
how far is there?
They might miss the target, but they're not going to miss it by much.
Even when they're drunk.
This is what they do. So.
Drunk archery.
Yeah. Who knew it was a thing?
I definitely didn't. I think you said before you came in, it's like, oh yeah, they're really into archery.
Yeah.
But this is way more fun.
Yeah. We actually went to a temple. It was a long hike, which us out of shape people barely survived, but it was the Tiger's Leap Monastery. And it's this cliffside monastery that's just way the hell up there. Mm-hmm. So, it's a really steep trail just to get to it.
Is this the one you had a picture of one that was kind of on the side of the cliff? I think it's one of the famous ones.
No, I don't have a picture of that one.
Okay.
But we thought about going up there, but after we climbed up just to the viewpoint, we're going, okay, we're using a telephoto and calling it good. But along the way, along the trail, we saw something that it looked like a target, but it was just in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't figure out what that was about. And so about 10 minutes later, we're slogging up the hill and we see another one pointed the other way. And we looked back across, and it was across this canyon. They had set up targets on either side of the canyon so people could shoot across the canyon.
It's like horseshoes, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this is more fun than horseshoes, though. We should bring this to the United States.
Yeah.
There's no liability involved,
fit a range
right?
in Chase Hall here.
Weirder things have happened. Throw that picture up there. You got that guy.
Yeah. See, he's there just making fun of the guy. Okay.
So that's something to do. I'd be into that. That'd be a lot of fun.
So
I feel like I'd have to
get
good at you got to get good at archery. So you said you can't miss by 3 feet.
Well, the bad ones weed out really quickly.
But I mean, I've gone archery shooting with people.
Yeah.
There's people that miss by 3 feet.
Oh yeah.
And especially at that long distance, like, oh.
Yeah. That's a matter of national pride. This is what they do in their spare time. So.
Yeah, I'm into it.
There's guys out there with, these guys were all using long bows. There are guys with compound bows out there too.
Yeah.
I guess it's like a different class of.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no crossbows, right?
No.
That's just cheating.
No.
Yeah.
So, if we hit the next picture, I think there was yes, we could throw this guy up for a second. So this was the minister of, I believe, culture for the country. interesting thing about Bhutan is that you can get very close to pretty senior members of government. So what was going on in the country here is they're a monarchy, or were at the time we were there, and they were, in this case, the king himself was driving towards a parliament because he wanted to westernize his country.
Yeah. That way he gets 2 jets full of $1 billion.
Yes.
As opposed to his 1 jet where people are chasing him down the runway.
Yeah. Actually,
that's probably smart.
He did it for very good reasons. And the reasons were that they are sandwiched between India and China. They're like a buffer between the two countries. And they have some of the greatest hydroelectric potential in the region. They have all this water.
Unlike Tibet is kind of like, I'm not sure what's...
Yeah. Bhutan has
is
some
different.
serious potential for hydroelectric power. And they don't want to do it on a large scale because it would ruin everything. And they also don't want China or India moving in, like India did with Sikkim and China did with Tibet. So they wanted to transition it on their own. Our guide was actually a member of the forming parliament.
Really? How big was their parliament?
I don't know, but I don't know, maybe 50 people would be my guess. But this guy traveled with us. We ate dinner with him. He talked to us at night. Told us about what was going on.
The Minister of Culture is right there.
Yeah,
right?
We met him. We shook his hand, and so that's traditional garb. And if you throw the picture back up,
so you can see.
You can see pretty much everyone in the background is wearing the similar things. So it's basically a robe, leggings, boots, usually a shawl for the more developed people. You can see there's one of the clowns is standing behind him, his left shoulder there with the leaves growing out of his head.
Right, okay, so this was during festival, right?
This was during Thimphu Festival, yeah.
Okay, so having the clown behind him isn't
not
out of place.
So,
because if you saw like Dr. Fauci right now,
yeah,
and Bozo the clown was behind him, you'd be like, "What's going on?"
Lose some context, yeah.
Right.
So, speaking of having close contact with senior members of government, little story: we were following the river down through the country, headed to the southern end so that we could transition into India. Long drive, not too many people on the road, certainly no potty stops anywhere along the way. So, after a while, we're like, okay, let's all find a spot, and guys on this side, gals on that side, everyone goes into the woods and spreads out and does their thing. As everyone starts coming out, there's no one for, you can't see anything for as far as you can see. As we're all coming out, zipping up our pants and whatnot, this convoy starts coming through, right? It's got motorcycles, several cars, and one of the cars has a license plate on it that says Bhutan 1.
Whoa.
So we're going, what the hell? And the car's driving by and the people inside are waving, and the big car with the Bhutan 1, there's a gal inside and she's like waving to us and smiling. It was the
There's Ken Hudson on the side of the road, zipping up his zipper.
Just double check there. It was the king's mother returning from a retreat down south in the country. So you never know what you're going to run into. And they don't fly. They only drive. The royal family only drove then. They wouldn't take a helicopter or fly airplanes. So
Safer,
right? Probably,
if you trust driving.
Yeah. So that was an interesting encounter. And I believe they've fully transitioned to Parliament.
It's probably a smart thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I think what they wanted to do was they wanted to be able to reach out for support from the Western countries in the event that anyone started getting designs on invading them and absorbing them.
Right.
Because India did that with Sikkim. Sikkim was an independent kingdom for a long time.
And they felt that they needed to be liberated and be brought into a parliamentary, so it's better to do it on your own terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because we were one of our drivers, who was Indian, by the way, actually, during a portion of the trip, was telling us that...
He was Indian during a portion of the trip?
Yes.
Or for a person.
He turned into
Like
something
as soon
else
as
at
you
the
got
border.
close to the
Yeah.
border, his accent started
Yeah.
changing, and you're like, oh, this guy's good.
Well, we had different drivers, during portions of the trip.
Right. So were you on like a bus or what?
There were times when we were on a small bus, and there were times when we were in these RAV4s.
And how many people were you traveling with?
Maybe like 8.
Okay.
Maybe 8 people, plus the drivers.
And then one guy had to bail out back in Tibet.
Yeah. So it was a smart move to just kind of get some protection there.
Right.
They did, as I mentioned, they had some amazing whiskeys there. Unfortunately, we weren't able to. Yeah, we weren't.
What do they make their whiskey out of?
Same stuff everyone else does, I guess. I didn't ask, but
Rye?
I
What
was
is
able to
this?
sample some of it, and it was outstanding.
This is a blend of straight whiskeys. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what that means. It's not bad.
So we did buy one bottle, and it ended up getting consumed during a particularly weird night. So I'll tell you about that in a bit.
The particularly weird night. I'm gonna save that. We're gonna
Right.
come back to it. Okay, so you're making your way through Bhutan.
So we get to the southern end, to Phuentsholing, which is the border city, and it's a little more rundown than the rest of Bhutan, but normally Bhutan is just pristine, beautiful, well kept. It's old, but it's really well kept. So we walked across the border into India to go to the customs station there, and first of all, there was nobody there. We had to wait around for like an hour for these guys to go find someone and come to process our
Can I
paperwork.
just keep going, or do
Yeah,
I have to wait here?
I mean, they'd have never known, but it was funny because about probably 100 feet across the border, you just started getting this sort of garbage stench, and you just knew you were in a poor part of India all of a sudden.
Yeah, you just moved
So it
countries.
was- yeah, but I mean, just in 100 feet.
I mean,
it made a
any
difference.
of our border cities here, if you've been
Yeah.
down to San Diego or El Paso, Juarez, or any of them, it's phenomenal how you're like, look, there's literally like 200 yards of separation here geographically,
Yeah.
and the only thing that changes is the political state leadership, the government. 200 yards of geography,
Yeah.
and look at the
Can make all
difference
the
between
difference.
look at the difference between these two.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that's what you saw in that
Yeah.
Bhutan-India border is.
Yeah.
Huh.
So our destination, once we got into India, the rest of it was a driving trip to get to Darjeeling. So we crossed a lot of the flatter areas, pretty bad roads, huge class disparity in India. You certainly have it in all the other countries, but when you hit India, there are just the change is you'll see just a mud house and a 3-story house next to each other.
Yeah, well, I think in the United States we obviously we have different classes, right? And there's a pretty big disparity. Yeah. But I think generally we like to we disparage that. We're like, anybody can go wherever they want, right? Yeah. There's mobility. Yeah. But I think in India, I've never been there, but from what I've heard, that's kind of built into society. Yeah. It's like, no, you are a lower class.
Yeah, and you will never be.
End of story, right? Not like, that person's low class, that person's middle class, and we don't really like to talk about that because we don't talk about that in the United States. I mean, it exists, but we don't talk about it. Well, but there, it's like, no, for sure, you're at this station.
Yeah. Well, you kind of get into the clueless American thing sometimes too, and someone in our car said, "Oh, is it a school holiday today? Why are these children not in school?" And I'm like, they're never in school. These are farmers' kids.
Jeez.
They're never going to see a school. So.
And that's true third world.
Yeah.
I feel like because, we think about like education and as a basic human right and all this, and when you see that
in Bhutan and other places, India also, some of the bad roads, the people who do the road work are Nepalese immigrants. And their entire families who just live on the side of a landslide, and they literally carry rocks, and someone else is breaking rocks with hammers and breaking it down into gravel-sized pieces.
And who's
to
employing
pave
them?
the roads. I guess the government pays them, but their whole camps, they just live there where they're working.
And that's like institutionalized. The government has to be like giving them money, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, yeah, break these rocks.
Yeah.
We got hammers.
And one of the things the guy in India told us was, well, India tends to come into these kind of unhappy, poor migrant groups that are in another country, and they stir them up. They stir up dissatisfaction and say, well, you've been there for 2 years. You should have rights. You should be able to vote. You should, and they stir them up and they create this dissension and try to destabilize. And so then that gives them an excuse to say, well, there was conflict going on. We had to step in and take over the country to make sure it didn't spread, So there's always that kind of push-pull going on there.
So I guess Bhutan has avoided that.
Yes.
So you cross the border from Bhutan to India. You had to wait at the customs house for hours while they found a customs representative to stamp your passport.
Yeah. And then we just...
I guess that's important. Rob Quist, again, was on here the other week. He ended up sneaking into Algeria, right?
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
So he locked himself in a bathroom on a train and snuck into Algeria. But then when he went to exit Algeria, he found that he needed an exit visa, and that was harder to obtain because
he didn't have an entry.
He didn't have an entry visa. All right, so you waited for your stamp.
Yeah, so we finally got that process, and there was actually a guy. They actually had a machine gun nest in front, and there was a guy actually sleeping just like hunched over asleep on the machine gun.
Sure.
He was the only guy there. He was the guy we went and rousted out and asked him to go find someone very carefully.
Did you tap him on the cheek with a penis?
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
Yes.
Right. Bhutan is here.
Yes.
Tap, tap.
So we drove many, many hours. I don't even remember how many, and finally ended up getting into the hills below Darjeeling. Darjeeling is just steep, mountainous, tea growing area. So you hear Darjeeling tea is supposed to be the best. Well, it's grown on these super steep hillsides for the most part, not too much flat land. Very hot, humid, hard work. And so there are these women out there picking tea leaves and throwing it in a bag, hand picking, throwing it into a bag over their back, and they bring in their bags and get paid by the bag. And
so when we drink Darjeeling tea, that's like legitimate.
Yeah.
It was literally picked.
It was grown and picked in Darjeeling.
Picked by hand. A leaf was picked by hand and thrown into a bag.
Because they only pick the fresh green. Certainly there are tea companies that are machine harvesting, and you're getting everything, including the branches in it.
Right.
But they're picking only the green leaves, and the tea is a camellia plant. Is what it is. So they pick the green shoots and they fill their bag and then keep moving on. And by the time they come back a couple weeks later, there's more green, and so they just keep making the rounds.
So what is it about Darjeeling that makes this excellent tea? I mean, I think we do the same thing.
Probably
with wine,
mostly
right?
because they lay claim to it, and so
right.
Interesting thing about tea too is that if you like British tea is this dark brown tea, and then you see green tea out of China, and mostly from what I understand, the British tea is dark because it was bundled up fresh, and by the time it got home, it had basically rotted like tobacco, has been set aside or whatever.
Well, that's like black
decay.
tea, right?
Yeah. So anyway, we're in Darjeeling, and we stayed in a hotel there. We went out and did various things. Threw a couple pictures here.
Well, let's throw those tea harvesters up there. That's a pretty good picture. You took that picture?
Yeah. So these are tea harvesters. This is one of the few really flat areas that we saw where people were harvesting. But this was miserable. I mean, we got out of the car here and we were taking some pictures, and they kind of showed us some of what they were doing. And I wanted nothing better than to get back in the car and get some AC going, because it was really hot and miserable there. So then you start driving up these steep switchback roads up into the mountains around Darjeeling. And this, let's hang on this photo for a second. We'll bring it up.
Tank.
So this,
Thomas the train.
this is a steam train that was, I believe, originally put in to help haul tea when the British were developing it as a tea area. But it's still functioning, and you can actually ride on this thing if you don't mind getting covered in head to toe in soot. But the road that runs through the main part of Darjeeling it's on a steep mountainside. So the mountainside comes down, you've got a 3-story house here, right next to the road, right behind it another 3-story house, and all the way, up a ways. And then on the downhill side, you have the first story of a 3-story house going down and down the hill.
Right.
So you've got this 2-lane road that's being shared by cars going both directions, the big lorries that you see in India sometimes that are stacked like 15 feet tall.
Right.
All sharing the road. And then in amongst all of that, this locomotive sometimes runs alongside the road, sometimes up the middle, sometimes crosses it. So traffic has to stop to let it pass.
Chaos.
And it's crazyville.
So on top of that, there's a slide in here. Pop that up, Andy. Are monkeys still a problem at this point?
Monkeys are. So let me tell you about this a little bit.
So you got lorries or trucks filled, like stacked to the brim, narrow road, houses, everything, and you got monkeys.
Yeah. So we're in our hotel one night, and we had we'd come back from dinner, we'd had a couple drinks. It was interesting, very, very British sort of place. Someone comes into each room and with a little coal shuttle and fires up a little coal fire in each room, because it gets pretty cold at night sometimes there. And so we're sitting there and just kind of relaxing, and all of a sudden we hear this, like someone's running across the roof. What's going on? And but it stopped, and so we didn't think much of it. And then we heard it again. And then we had like 2 people running across the roof. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So I go, okay, I'm gonna go find out what's going on. So I go outside, and they've got a balcony, but it's glassed in, right? I mean, to get to your room, there's this balcony, but they've glassed it in on the outside. And I'm looking around, I don't see anything, and there's a guy, one of the guys who works in the hotel is down the hall doing something, and he looks at me, and I'm going, like, someone's running on the roof. He goes, look. So earlier in the day, we had been looking out over the balcony, and down below there was an area where they were selling monkey food, right? So people are selling or buying food and feeding the monkeys down there. Well, apparently where they hang out at night is on Lookout Hill, which is behind us. So as I'm standing there, all of a sudden, like 3 monkeys come running up this rain spout that's right in front of me here. And like big one stops and looks at me, and then goes on up and runs across the roof. And there's mama monkeys with babies hanging on their backs, and I probably counted 30 or 40 monkeys just in the little time I stood there and watched them come up this drain pipe, right? So we go, okay, that's weird. And he said, yeah, they're going to Lookout Hill. So we go, we'd heard about Lookout Hill, so we thought, well, we should walk up there and take a look.
So this is the middle of the night.
You couldn't
like sleep
dusk.
Anyway because there's a troop of
like
monkeys
dusk.
running
So
across your roof.
Yeah, it wasn't late, it was dusk. And so we said, all right. So we grabbed our cameras and whatever, and we took this hike, and it was a substantial climb, but we got to Lookout Hill. And as we're walking, we see this guy. Can we show
There he is.
So And we keep seeing them, and we keep seeing them in groups of 2, 3, 4. And some of these, bear in mind, are like the size of a small child. And you start looking at them, and you look at their teeth, and you start thinking, how many of it would it take to take you down and eat you if they wanted to? So we ended up going up the mountain, and at the top of the hill, they have a sign that says, "Beware the monkeys," right? It would have been more useful at the bottom of the hill to let you know. But you get to the top of the hill, and there's a small temple up there, and they've got prayer flags everywhere. And there are groups who go up there, and they've got big bonfires going, and they're drumming, and a very surreal experience. So that was fairly cool.
That I think you made the right call there. You heard monkeys running on top of your roof in your hotel, so you followed the monkeys up a hill.
Yeah.
And you discovered
all this other cool
scene,
stuff.
Which you'd never see before.
Yeah. So it's a fun little mini adventure.
Yeah.
And so the next day, we ended up doing some more driving around and looking at stuff, and we went to a temple, because that's what you do, is you go to temples.
Right.
And on our way back, by now we're in these RAV4s, right? And we pull out onto the road, and there's all these school kids, right, just marching down the street, and we're going, what, did school just let out? It's kind of the middle of the day, and it was, oh no, they're demonstrating, and we start looking around, and they've got like signs and stuff, and they didn't look very happy, and then it seemed like there were more adults sort of joining them. And of course, our car has just now pulled out into the middle of all of this, right? And they're all around you. And you're starting to go, so this is a demonstration. We're in a small car that like 2 children could roll over if they wanted to.
Right.
And are we safe here? He goes, we'll leave this area. Okay, great.
Are we safe?
Yeah.
We'll go somewhere else.
So
that's not what you want to hear.
So we navigated our way through the crowd, and fortunately people moved out of the way, and we ended up going back to the hotel.
This was in India, in Darjeeling,
This
right?
is in Darjeeling. So we started asking more questions about what's going on. And so apparently, back in the ancient kingdom days, there was the kingdom of Gorkha, right? Nepal, and then there was Sikkim. And Darjeeling was sort of a disputed territory that Sikkim owned, and then Nepal came in and took it with Gorkha. And so there was a show there called Indian Idol, which is like the American Idol version of, same.
Were these people protesting because their favorite contestant lost?
No.
Okay.
It's worse than that. So they had a local policeman who had entered and had won.
Okay.
And apparently some radio DJ somewhere had made some disparaging remark and said something to the effect of, oh, so I guess you'll have to protect yourselves because all the Gorkhas are now singing. All right.
Okay.
So since most of them are of Gorkha or Nepalese descent in that area, they really took offense to that. And so they decided to go out and demonstrate about it.
So they demonstrated against a radio DJ?
Yes.
I feel like radio DJs don't have that.
Well, they considered it they basically considered it sort of a racist comment. It was offensive to them as Gorkha.
Yeah, but I mean,
descendants.
I would say like a lot of our TV personalities and radio hosts make disparaging comments fairly frequently in the United States, but people don't demonstrate about.
All I can say is,
like if Anderson Cooper, right? If Anderson Cooper, that guy doesn't make really disparaging comments, right? But if he made some racial disparaging comment, I don't think people would be protesting Anderson Cooper.
Yeah, well, apparently Indian Idol is a really big deal there.
So this was really important.
So it was important to them. And so we got back to the hotel, and it was, okay, we're not going out again. and this thing started spreading. And basically, most of Darjeeling got caught up in it, and we got pretty much locked down for the rest of the night. And the next day, we were going to drive out, and they said, okay, we're not taking the route that we were going to take. We're taking back roads. And back roads there are really back roads. These were nasty, deep potholes.
I think there's a picture somewhere around that somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, and they're just horrendous. And one of the guys who was in our...
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
Is that the super bad back road?
Yeah, so that's one of them, and I'll show you more.
I can see a road there.
I'll show you more later.
That's a washed out area, right?
Yeah, so they've built that all back up with stone, but
so this is a
but
normal
you can see
road,
basically
yeah.
there's room for one car to go by. You're not passing anybody on that portion.
Right.
But what you don't really see in this photo is that if you look to the right of the road and you see it drops off, if you go walk over there and look down, that might be 200 or 300 yards down. So if you roll off, you're pretty much dead.
Yeah.
There's no coming back. So we ended up taking this back road. One of the guys who was with us in our car that day had a
Go
bad
back to that
back.
weak bridge sign. That's funny.
Oh yeah. So yeah, this is as we came in, as we took all these back roads and we ended up crossing into Sikkim. This is the sign we were greeted with on the bridge. And I had read that, and I looked on the bridge, and there were 2 fully loaded lorries crossing this bridge.
Yeah.
I'm going, okay, it says 1 vehicle at a time. Okay.
And 5 tons. 5 tons.
I'm pretty sure 2 of those lorries is more than 5 tons.
Yeah.
But we let them clear off the bridge before we crossed. But not the kind of thing you want to see when you're...
Yeah.
So we ended up checking into a hotel. We did all our...
So this is you've gotten into Sikkim at this point,
So
right?
we're into Sikkim now.
Which is an independent state.
Well, no, it was an independent kingdom until I think it was the late 50s. India decided, yeah, we're going to stir up some stuff and we're going to absorb you, and they did. So
it's
like
technically
a part of India
protectorate, now. Or do they have any sort of independent government at Sikkim?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just
India.
It's another state in India, but yeah, outside of that, it doesn't mean much.
But I think, if we were looking at the map, like if you were to draw, like I have an idea of the shape that India exists, right? And I don't think Sikkim is part of that.
Sikkim is very tiny.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you moved over into Sikkim.
Yeah, and Sikkim, I don't have a lot of photos of Sikkim or many good stories about it because it was kind of unremarkable, really. It's kind of a dirty, beat-up old city.
What'd you go there for?
Just because.
It was on the list?
We weren't going to go back on a separate trip, so we decided, well, we'll just take it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we saw some textile factories and things, and a little bit interesting. But basically, our last night there in the hotel, first of all, we checked into our hotel room, and every night, we drag out all of our batteries and chargers and whatever for the cameras,
right.
And we do all our photo downloads, and we plug in chargers to charge batteries for the next day, whatever we've burnt that day. And so we ended up, at the time, they didn't have these universal, 110, 220.
Right, plug it into whatever. Yeah.
You had to have these adapter transformers and stuff,
Yeah.
So we had one of those, and we plugged this thing in, and I plugged in probably 5 or 6 batteries and other devices, and all of a sudden, boom, the whole wing goes dark. Right?
Uh-oh.
Ooh. So we sort of covered that.
That wasn't us.
called the desk and said, I think we seem to be having a problem up here. So they came in, they looked around, and after about 15 minutes, the lights came back on. So someone went and shoved a penny in the fuse box or whatever they did to get it running again. And so we ended up, I go, okay, I'm just going to plug in 2, right? Just 2, because we need those. And so I went and plugged those two, and bang.
Like
right?
pretty instantly. So you knew this was you. This wasn't you know.
it wasn't, yeah.
This
it
was
us.
definitely Ken Hudson.
I mean, the first one took a while, but that one pretty much as soon as I plugged it in, bang. But this time it was just our room. So again, it was like kind of obvious.
So
sorry.
The hotel is isolated to you. You are the problem.
And they basically came back and said, okay.
What are you doing?
They couldn't fix it, right? So fortunately, there was an empty room across the hall. But just before we had blown it out, you know, we were repacking for the next day because, you know, at the end of our trip.
So all your stuff's exploded all over
At the end of our trips,
Sure.
we unload all the disposable stuff that we, you know, toilet paper and things that we're not going to need for the rest of the trip. And, well, I mean, you know, thinking back on it, I should have kept it now.
Right.
But everything was spread all over the bed, right? Completely unpacked, and now the room is pitch black. And no windows, no nothing to help. So we ended up, and we had bought one bottle of Bhutan whiskey, and we thought, we're just going to crack this with everybody, you know, the last night. And so we'd already invited everyone over. So we basically got hold of the bedspread with all of our stuff on it and dragged it across the hall, threw it on the other bed. And everyone showed up expecting whiskey, so we cracked the bottle and poured it around. We got some of it packed, and then it was time to go down to dinner. So our guide says, well, I've got good news and bad news for you. So good news, this is our last night here. We're going to have a really nice dinner. Drinks around the house, you know, and we're going to enjoy ourselves. And the bad news, well, the rioting has gotten worse. We can't take the main roads, and we want to avoid daylight. So we're going to be leaving at 2:30 in the morning.
Oh, geez.
So we finished dinner around 11. We've got all of our crap all over the bed. So we had to pack our stuff, and basically didn't get any sleep that night.
Yeah.
So we pile into
So how'd you pack all your stuff in the dark?
Well, we had light in there.
Okay.
So it was
so
okay.
You dragged
you
it
know,
back, but you didn't do that room check.
No.
I'll tell you what, Rich Mayfield's travel tips, right? Headlamps, always headlamps. Mm-hmm. Headlamps these days are so tiny and so cheap. You put them in there. Yeah. I have a headlamp in my truck. I have it in my backpack. I have headlamps everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're fantastic because it's not like that minor headlamp.
Yeah.
You know, that's like a whole thing. And
yeah.
No, these like little headlamps that have two AAA batteries in them are fantastic.
Yeah, very useful.
But you didn't have that then. And again, this was like 10 years ago?
Yeah, like 2007. Oh. I mean, we had flashlights. We'd just stand them on the end and, you know, put them up on the seat. You had
a headlamp is indispensable at this point in travel.
So anyway, so we pile into these cars, and of course, it's just starting to rain. And I don't mean just rain. I mean monsoon rain. It was just pouring to where you at times couldn't see. You really couldn't see more than 10 feet in far at times. And so...
good thing you can't go too fast on those back roads, huh?
Yeah. So let me put a couple more of the back roads.
Back road pictures.
Well, let me pull this one up. Just show that one.
This guy.
So this was just... this was a temple we went to in Sikkim, and I just saw this monk sitting on this wall. There's a big drop away in front of him, but it just kind of had a really peaceful feel to me, and he was just out there meditating and watching the fog roll by, so little diversion. Next, okay, so that's our little RAV4 convoy, and it's just starting to rain here.
So those three vehicles, those are the vehicles that were in your little group?
Yeah, and then...
that are going to go take on the back roads in the monsoon.
Next photo.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so this was one car wide. We got out of the car and let him drive across on this one, and we walked across. But that whole road section just slid away, and that's several hundred yards straight down. But if you can see the walkway there, some I-beams across there that was there next to the road before it slid away, people were still walking across that to get to the other side of it.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So a couple more photos. So yeah, some
So
big. This is a
trek
rock
out
slide.
of Sikkim.
Yeah. So this was as the daylight started to come out. So in the middle of the night, it's pouring rain, and a big section of road had washed out. It was just gone. So they diverted us through a forest. They had like ribbons tied on trees, and we were driving through forests at like 4 in the morning, pouring rain. Lorries coming the other way, like within a foot or two.
Who diverted you through the forest?
There was a detour sign.
And then your guides are just following like ribbons on trees?
Yeah.
And this is normal?
Apparently, yeah.
Man, I get pissed off when they shut down I-5 and I gotta go follow detours through City of Industry or some stuff.
It was an adventure, but these guys are amazing. I mean, we blew a tire. We blew tires 3 times because they're rough roads, sharp rocks everywhere. And first time it happened, we blew a right rear tire, and we're going, well, how long is it going to take for the tow truck to get here?
Nope, spare tire.
And they're like, yeah, there are no tow trucks, and so you're just going to change to the spare, and no spares. So, oh yeah, no, happens all the time. So, within 10 minutes, this guy had the wheel off. He had the tire off of the rim, and he'd pulled a patch kit out of the glove compartment, and he was like, laying this patch on there. And I'm thinking, as we're driving across these 1-lane roads with a steep cliffside, I wonder how many patches are on that tire.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but they're resourceful. I mean, this is just like any country. You deal with what you have, and you learn to live with it and make it work. So, things we just kind of take for granted are just not available. So they find other ways.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's cool though. That's a good story. It's amazing what you get used to, right?
Yeah.
Like again, you think about we here in Southern California, like get angry about.
Yeah.
Like if I blew a tire on the way home, I'd be mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're traveling through these back roads in the Himalayas, that's something that happens.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I lived there for a couple of years, I wouldn't care either.
Yeah.
It would just be a normal.
Yeah, it's just a normal thing that happens.
Yeah.
You just deal with it.
So did you make it out? Obviously, you made it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Finally, it turned into it. We got daylight, and the rain backed off. So if you back to the boulder, and then the next. So this to the right, the last picture you saw was big boulders on the right side of the road. On the left side of the road was one of the other boulders that kept going and smashed up against this house on the other side.
So that house was there before that boulder was there.
Yeah, you can see the roof is sort of crunched in.
So that boulder made its way down the hill, and
yeah,
that is a beautiful house, though. That looks like a really nice house.
Nice scenery. Nice
Put
view.
that back up there again. Wow.
Yeah. So the rest of the road, was rough, but it was, the rain had stopped. We had daylight, and then we eventually ended up down in the flatlands and on our way to the. One more picture, the last one.
Oh. The ever-present.
So yeah, we had one last shot at monkeys.
And what species of monkey is
on the
this?
way.
Because it does look like it's been the same species.
I have no idea.
Kind of throughout the whole thing.
This guy was. We got stopped waiting for a train to cross.
And this asshole shows up.
Yeah, and these monkeys are around, and this guy was just sitting there staring, kind of scratching himself and whatever. And so I just poked out the window, took a few pictures, and thought that one turned out kind of cool. So
I bet you learned that when you see the signs, watch out for the monkeys. You take them seriously, right?
Yes.
Because I remember, when my wife and I were in Gibraltar, okay, so we show up and we hear about these monkeys. We're like, oh, that's cool. And then there's these warning signs, and we're like, how quaint.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Yeah. The cute monkeys. And then you're introduced to what the reality of the monkey situation is, and you're like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, we ran into a fair number of monkeys in like Laos back in the day. And some of them are pretty nasty and aggressive.
I took a side hike, and I come back, and there's this monkey on my wife's lap. And she's like, he just, and I'm like, all right, what do I do? It's like, well, we got to go. Maybe just kind of wiggle, and he'll
throw a peanut over there.
he'll move off. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I definitely appreciate that I think anybody, if you're watching, right, like you're like, oh, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then you kind of cope with the reality that these things are, are a menace.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, anytime you travel, you never know what you're going to run into exactly, and you just adapt and have fun with it.
So where do you go? So you got out of Sikkim.
So that's pretty much it. We were down in the flatlands again, and because we had left so early, the airport wasn't open yet. Our flight was like 4 hours later.
Where was your flight out of?
Our ultimate flight was out of Delhi.
Okay.
But we had to fly from this rustic airport to Delhi, and we overnighted there and then flew out the next morning.
Wow.
So it was funny because I've experienced a lot of different cultures, and for whatever reason, the Indian culture just kind of puts me on edge. They're very intense and bargaining about everything, and some of the things you run into with shopkeepers trying to sell you brass stuff at the fair or whatever. That's kind of how a lot of it is there. And,
it's aggressive, huh?
Yeah, very aggressive, and so if you're not used to that, it becomes kind of irritating after a while. And it's like that next morning, it's like, I can't wait to get out of India, And then it's like on the plane on the way back, we're going, I'd probably come back, because there's other interesting things. But
that's it. You go there, when you travel, like it sounds like you travel like I travel. You go there to see the culture, right? And you want to observe, and you want to look at stuff, and maybe you want to pick up a Gurkha knife or this. But other than that, you don't want to be sold to like the entire time.
Yeah, no, it's everything's a negotiation.
But when you're there, you're just like, I just wanted to look at this temple. I wasn't really planning on buying anything, and I would like to just sit here for a while, Yeah.
So fortunately, a lot of the places we went certainly were tourist sites, but a lot of places we got to were out away, not so much. So you got to experience both. And I would love to go back to Nepal, actually, and spend more time and see more of the country.
Well, it sounds, all the people, it sounds like a really rich area. And most of the time when we hear about this area, it's about a trek to Everest.
Yeah.
And all that you just laid out for us gets skipped over.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad we got to hear that. So at the end, normally what we do is we have questions. I know we don't talk about it earlier, but
if anyone's still awake,
I'm sure Andy has collected his fair share of questions on that stream. Andy, do we have any questions from our viewers up there? Or no, because nobody watched. Just kidding.
Well, before we get to that, let's do a couple shout outs here. Michael Bashad coming in real hot. Did you hear any talk from locals about the Yeti? And what are your opinions about it?
So, a couple of people have asked me that.
So the Yeti. So there's a Yeti legend.
So the hotel we stayed in Nepal was called the Yak and Yeti.
Okay.
So Yeti is certainly part of their culture. We didn't see any. I'm inclined to believe there's probably something out there because there are enough cultures and talking about it.
So you're a Bigfoot believer?
I think it's probably one of the more credible cryptozoology things out there. But, I'll believe it fully when I see it.
Yeah. Social distancing champion of the world.
Yes.
The Yeti.
Yeah, I wish I had. It would have been a great experience, but we probably weren't quite remote enough to be in that.
What else we got there, Andy?
Couple shout outs for the chat. Michael Brashad and CJ Jungle, or C Jungle.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.